gamers. Today we're doing December 2022 Civ tier list. Some things have changed and I will be doing a Civ tier list for this map pool right here that you see. So Hideout is out. And if Hideout is out, you know where Rus is going. Hold on, not yet. Hold on. Number 1 Civ, nothing changed. In my opinion, China is still the best Civ by far. Like, it's playable on every of these maps. Maybe not so good on Prairie, I would say. Maybe not so good on Wetlands. So it has 2 maps that are so-so for China, but still, it's just crazy. It's just really, really good. It really do be like that. And we got a new contender for the S tier. Do you know what that contender is? Another S tier Civ that I think it's climbed up. And I think more and more people are realizing, hold up, this Civ is actually pretty good. You know, we've had moments where we were like, you know, they're not so good. Maybe they're good, maybe they're bad. But these days, me and including a lot of top pro players considered English to be one of the best Civs right now. The meta used to be super aggressive for a moment, and it still is, but now it's a lot easier to get your second TC with English and then just be aggressive. Late game English is the best by far, that's not a question. They can be played on water maps. The longbows are really good. The players are getting better and better with microing longbows. And overall, I think English is a really, really good Civ. I think also players have learned how to hold on in Castle. You know, I always mention this every time I talk about English, that English in Castle is pretty weak. The thing is, the meta has changed in general, and it's no longer people rushing Castle and then just killing you. So because that's not happening anymore, the Castle is usually much slower. Maybe HRE rushes it in Malians, but the Castle is usually much slower, and that gives English time to kind of build up and prepare. So English, very nice. Strelbora. The next Civ that we're gonna be putting in there is, I think I'm gonna go with the obvious one. I think Mongol is really good. Not much has changed, right? Mongol is Mongol. It's tower rush into whatever, and these maps that they're in, you know, like Dra Arabia, even French Pass, King of the Hill, Lipany, Mongolian Heights, even Pit, Prairie, especially Wetlands, so Mediterranean. I've played some Mongol Mediterranean, it's not bad. So I don't think there's bad maps for Mongol. Is it an OP Civ? No, but it doesn't really have bad maps, and I think that's pretty important when you talk about the ladder and when you talk about Civ strength. You can play Mongols on any map and be completely fine. And I don't think they have any counters. You know, like, if I look at these Civs, I don't say like, oh yeah, this Civ just counters Mongols completely. It's playable against every Civ, so because of that, it's pretty good. The next Civ we will be discussing, this is a hard one because a lot of these Civs now kind of, they're good, but it's hard to rank them in my opinion. I feel that this would be the Civ tier list for most top players like this starting out, and now I think it depends a lot on what the player's opinion is. So the next Civ that I will be doing is HRE. I think HRE is not OP, but again, HRE I think is just an overall solid pick. You can play it against any Civ. It can go late game, it can go early game, it can go mid game. All these maps, HRE is completely fine to play on. Some maps have short rush distance, so you can do Burger. It's, you know, not OP or anything, but it's pretty good to do. So I think HRE is just a solid pick. And it's weird because it used to be this like one-trick pony, playing it on like maps where you're super walled off so you can rush castle. And now with the 2TC build that I have a guide for, you can check out on YouTube, I feel like HRE almost comes as like a safe pick. Like you can pick it and not have to worry about much. And I would say the only Civ that counters HRE pretty hard is Malians. Interestingly enough, I think Malian matchup for them is pretty rough. So So as long as you avoid that, you'll be good to go. Is Relics A-Tree and Burgrave A-Tree different tiers? No, I don't think so. You should, in my opinion, you should never go into the game and be like, I'm going Regnitz, and you're like getting banged up the ass, and you're just like, I'm going Regnitz. It's like, well, if you're about to die, just go, you know, Burger Palace, or if you have all the freedom in the world, just go Cathedral, right? So you should not pre-plan H3 landmarks, because it can be dependent on the map, on the matchup, on the situation you're in, and so forth. So yeah, the next civ we will be talking about is Rus. I think Rus is probably the worst civ right now. It had extremely high win rate because of hideout. Other than that, it has terrible win rate. It's not picked a lot, and it's kind of weird because it feels like it's not that bad, but when you play it, it just, I don't know, it just feels off. I think there were too many nerfs on Rus in the same time. Like TC cost increase, TC build time increase. Their walls are now made 100% slower than they used to. They do not gather bounty from sheep, and the wolves cannot be pulled and dragged anymore. You have to kill them where they are. So that's 5 nerfs to Rus in, like, not the most recent patch, but the one before. And I think it just hit them pretty hard. Also, the meta was like, you know, fighting in feudal forever, and that was good for Rus. Now the meta has changed a little bit, and that doesn't benefit Rus too much, in my opinion, anymore. So it is what it is. The next civ we will be talking about is French. Now, the reason why I'm putting French this low is because I don't think this map pool is the greatest for French, but also French, in my opinion, is right now just better Rus, which is why it's that low. Except Rus can be played on most of these maps, and French so-so. So I think French on Mongolian Heights is playable, but it's not really good. French on the Pit is fine. French on the Wetlands is okay. French on Prairie is okay, even good, if you want to say it that way. French on French Pass, funnily enough, I don't think it's that good. You can wall off really easily on French Pass, and then you won't be able to put any pressure. King of the Hill French, not that great, and then Mediterranean French, pretty bad. So I think French would maybe be like a tier higher if the maps were slightly better for them, but if you have to like dodge half the maps because you'll just, you know, be at a disadvantage because of the other civs, you know, like I said, I'm making the map pool based on the civs and based on the maps you're playing on, and I just don't think this is the greatest map pool. If you're playing maybe Dry Arabia, you know, French would be a little bit higher, or playing only on the Pit or something, but overall, if you're trying to one-trick something, French is probably not the best thing, but again, that doesn't mean that it's bad. So in Rus case, I do feel the Rus is a little bit weak. In French case, I don't think it's that weak. It's probably like a B tier, but because of the maps, I'm gonna give it a C tier. The next civ we will be talking about is Malians. Now, initially, I was going to put Malians higher, but I don't think it's there yet. So last time, the Malians, I think, were the worst. I was thinking about putting them in A tier, but I'm going to do B tier for Malians. There has been a build with rushing Farimba, aka the Salami build, as we learned. Rushing Castle into Farimba, and it looks really strong, and initially I thought it's OP, and I thought like Malians is for sure at least A tier. But then I played some more against it, and I beat it with a lot of different civs, so I'm like, okay, I don't think it's OP, but I do think it's pretty strong, and I would say Malians is pretty decent. Malians is really strong against Rus, really strong against French, and it's really strong against HRE specifically. Very strong against HRE. And I think this is by far probably the worst matchup that HRE has had since its release, even when French was crapping on HRE for the longest time. The reason for that is HRE wants to rush castle, get to man-at-arms, get to knights. Well, the problem is Malian can also rush castle and then beat both of those units with Musafati warriors. And if you ever decide to go archers with HRE, which is not the great spot to be in as HRE, then Malians can just make javelin throwers immediately. So it's a rough matchup, I will say that. And I think maybe low leagues have not caught up to this yet. Like, maybe they're not doing it, but this is already happening quite a lot at the high level. And I think it's only a matter of time till people see it in a tournament, and then people start copying it more and more, and then I think Malian will become more and more played. And I can also see Malian moving up to A tier, because this just got figured out recently, and the longer the time passes, people will play Malians better, because other civs are more or less figured out, right? So Malians has a lot of room for improvement, I think, in terms of how they play their build. And recently they got buffs, right? Gold Pit now has more gold income. Their cows are cheaper, so yeah. And if I look at these maps, you know, they are pretty good on these maps. Maybe Mediterranean not the best map for them, but other than that, I don't see a reason why you wouldn't play Malians. It's pretty good, pretty decent. If all the pros knew what they know now about Malian, would have been more Malian picks during the Wololo tournament. Yeah, for sure. Because one of the most popular civs during Wololo was HRE, and French as well, for some players. So if I played against like Marine Lord or Luciferon, I would have 100% picked Malians if I knew what I know now, right? And honestly, not much has changed since Wololo in terms of balance. They did get small buffs, but people just figured out the civs a little bit more. So yeah, I do think people would pick Malians more. The Malians meta during the Wololo, most players were trying like 2 TC Malian into feudal pressure, which just kind of sucked, or like into some kind of cow boom, and it just wasn't that good. So yeah, I think the Farimba is the way to go for sure in H3, and I don't see a reason why you would go the other landmark. The next civ we will be talking about is... Oh, this is a hard one. Let's go with Delhi. I personally think Delhi is really good. Now, I know this is probably going to be the most controversial opinion, because Delhi is the least picked civ, and not many players play Delhi, even at the top level. Like, a lot of them stopped practicing it. But I don't remember the last time I lost with Delhi. I think it's great on open maps. It's not good on Mediterranean. So that's something you should probably avoid. Like, it's not good on Mediterranean and Mongolian heights. Maybe not great on King of the Hill either. But every other map, I feel like you can play them just fine. They put a lot of pressure on the opponent. They can rush castle. So even against civs like Malians, I actually played Delhi versus Malians, and I thought that Delhi would lose really badly, but I felt pretty comfortable and the game was pretty okay for me. The fact that there's games that you say long feudal or long castle, I think is good for Delhi, because you get all your upgrades for free and you're allowed to make a lot of units. There are civs that are really good against Delhi, and those civs are China and HRE specifically. I think those are very hard matchups for Delhi. But I also think you don't see HRE as much as you used to like a month ago. A month ago, like everyone and their grandma and their mom and their sister was playing HRE. Now, I feel like the civs are more balanced regarding picking, at least at the higher level. But also I saw that HRE play rate is also going a little bit down under Conqueror as well. So I think Delhi is just a solid pick. And I think it's pretty good, especially because you can go Tower of Victory now as well. You can go Dome of the Faith, and then in Castle you can go for either of the landmarks. So I think it has a lot of variety in which way you can kind of transition out of it. The next civ we'll be talking about is probably gonna say Ottomans. I'm gonna go here. I think Ottoman is strong, and I think a lot of pro players would disagree with me on that one. I think they would swap Delhi and Ottoman maybe, or they would even put Delhi at C tier. I think Ottoman is good, but right now it's a one-trick pony kind of thing, and that one trick is the build, the guide that I have on YouTube, which is just the mass archer stuff. Some people have been experimenting with 2TC, but I feel like the moment you go 2TC, it's not as good. So I feel like it's maybe a little bit predictable from the Ottoman, but what they do is really strong. Then late game Ottoman is not the greatest. Castle Ottoman I think is probably, Feudal and Castle Ottoman is probably their peak because of the sheer amount of units they can produce. But other than that, I just feel like very predictable, and whenever Civ is predictable, it kind of lowers their play a little bit. And their Civ is so focused on just mass archers that, yeah. Regarding map pool for Ottoman, I mean, they're pretty much played everywhere, I would say. Maybe you don't want to play them on, like, Mediterranean. But I would say other maps, completely fine. Maybe not Prairie because of lack of wood and you want to go Mass Archer. But you can do some Castle Rush builds, so I think it's okay. It's just, there's some better stuff out there. Let's just say that. And the last one is Abbasid. I'm probably just gonna put Abbasid into B tier. I do think Abbasid took some hits. Maybe I would even consider putting it A tier. I'm not actually sure about Abbasid. Not many people play it these days, I feel like. I don't know if I should put Delhi down now, because I feel like Delhi's not as strong as Mongols. I'm gonna have to put it like this, actually. I think Abbasid is pretty good. It can be played on Mediterranean, by the way. The bonus of Abbasid is that you can play it on any of these maps quite easily. I don't think any of these maps are bad for Abbasid. Maybe Prairie, actually not the greatest. So I think it has good playability, but right now maybe it's a little bit too slow in certain matchups. Like some civs can just kind of outboom you, like China, or if you're going head to head with English and you're both booming, then English is going to have advantage later on. I don't think it's a bad civ. I think Abbasid is also Abbasid, like Mongol, like HRE, I think or English is also just civs that you can play anywhere and do okay with. It kind of depends what you prefer, but I think it's a pretty good civ. This civ tier list was probably actually the hardest to do, and that's a good thing in my opinion, because it just shows that the balance between the civs is a lot closer these days. I would say the only obvious one that I would put is Rus. And even if I put French here and then remove this, like removed D tier, I think this is also okay. But in my personal opinion, I do think French is a bit weaker than some of these other civs. Like, I think if you look at French against like China, obviously it's China favored. Mongol can put a lot of pressure on French. French versus HRE, I don't think it's French favored anymore. French versus Malians is a disaster for French. Ottoman, I think, can do pretty okay against French, and we saw Magic beating Marine Lord at the tournament. Delhi versus French, if Delhi goes Tower of Victory, it's a rough matchup for French. So it's just not very favorable in any of these matchups. Like, I'm not looking at this and I'm like, I'm going to use French to snipe some of these other civs. And we even saw this at Red Bull tournament. There was only 2 players that played French, and that was Lucifron and Marine Lord. Everyone else just kind of avoided French, and French was also used on like 2 or 3 maps only. So yeah, I think this is going to be my civ tier list. Hopefully I provided you guys with some information. Now I do want to say, whenever I make these, I want to make sure I say this. The most important thing is that you play a civ that you enjoy. If that civ is Rus, you should practice Rus, you should play Rus. If that civ is French, Mongol, HRE, whatever, play that civ. The most important thing for you is to play what you enjoy and not what's best. Because for what we know, we might have Rus buffs next month, and then you've been practicing, you know, Mongol, and then Mongol gets nerfed and Rus is buffed, and you're like, fuck, I should have stayed with Rus, you know? So I think the balance comes and goes, and that's why it's important to play what you enjoy. Because whenever you enjoy a civ and play it, you will actually play way better and be better at it. And not something that, you know, you shouldn't just speak like what's OP. Because, you know, I think especially at the, like, S tier civs might not be as good in lower leagues. Or D tier civs might be better in lower leagues than they are at the higher leagues. So, with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this December 2022 civ tier list. I will be doing, obviously, another Civ tier list in January. I don't know if we're going to have any patches or balance patches, mini patches by then. But I do think that the new season is in February. Does it say in game? 10 weeks, 2.5 months. So yeah, February, the new season is coming. And that's when I assume we'll have major balance changes where we'll be able to tell a lot more, and the game will be shaken up quite a bit more. So, for watching on YouTube, thank you guys so much for watching. Appreciate it. If you're watching on Twitch, let's keep going.